Alright, welcome back. Today we are working on Manhattans, and we're going to do a very classic one. It's just going to be a simple combination of rye, bitters, and back here we have some port. And this is actually a variation called a port Manhattan, otherwise known as a ruby Manhattan. Very tasty option. The sweetness of the port with the additional grape flavor that comes through is a very nice addition. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a little bit of rye. Some other alternatives that you can do that are equally tasty are bourbon. And this one is a Old Heaven Hill, which my grandfather used to love. Love that stuff. He always kept it underneath the counter in the kitchen. Needless to say, my grandmother had a lot to say about that. And we've got Maker's Mark, which is a classic as well. You'll find it at many weddings all across the U.S., in which people get very liquored. So we're going to start with a little bit of this rye. And the ratio for rye and port is about 2 to 1. And so this is our handy little jigger. And so we've got 2 going in there. And we've got 1 of this port going in. I like this port. I like port in general. It's quite tasty. It's a kind of let to sit red wine with a good bit of sweetness to it that's very nice for a lot of different purposes. Alright, so we've got this up, and I've got a glass of ice here that I grabbed from the refrigerator, and we're just going to throw it in there. And then we've got some options for bitters here. I've got the old Angostura, rather, which is quite tasty, which is going in. I'm going to give it a good bit. So that was 5 shakes. And then we've got the Pei Chowds, which is also quite tasty. This one I think is a cherry. And then this is the Bitter Truth Orange Bitters. That's also a pretty interesting one that I like as an alternative to the Angostura. But in this case I'm just going to go with the old reliable. So this has been sitting here for a little bit, cooling well, and I'm going to shake it like so. And then while I'm shaking, this is a glass that I cooled off with some crushed ice. It's just some ice that I got out of the freezer. It's all nice and cool-like. I can feel it from the outside. So we've got a cooled glass here. Give that a few more shakes, open it up, and then we're pouring it out. So you can see that it's pouring out nice and slowly. This is all 3 ounces, and it takes a little bit. And what the shaking process does is it adds a nice little bit of water to it, which opens up the whiskey, or the bourbon, or the rye, in a nice way. Kind of smooths it out a little bit. If I had to guess, I'd say that the cocktail is going to end up being around 30%, just from the additional water. You could go and do all the science on this to figure out just what your percent is if you'd like, but I'm not really that interested in that part of it. So, we've got the beginning of it here, and now it just needs something for garnish. One of the classics is Maraschino cherries. These are some cheap ones that I got across the river over in Kentucky. I won't tell you about that trip. That was pretty interesting. So we're just going to chuck one of those in for entertainment value. What you could do, if you wanted to spice it up a little bit, would be to take one of these things and start taking the rind off of it. And then you could either flame it or just leave it raw and make a pretty nice little garnish that you can put on the rim. And since this has got that nice kind of red color to it, the yellow would be a nice offset. So there you have it. That's a pretty classic Manhattan right there.